Hello, my name is Tracy Allen, and I want to welcome you to Cooking with Some Friends. Good morning and welcome to Cooking with Some Friends. Today they're calling for rain outside, and I don't know, it looks like it off and on, but I'm not sure what it's going to do. I probably ought to water my flowers, because if I water my flowers then it'll rain for us. So I don't know if that's true, but it feels like it sometimes. We are making some recipes that we wanted to share with you for the 4th of July, and we had some people respond, my top viewers respond to would you rather type thing. And when it came to pies or cakes, they prefer they prefer pies over cakes for the 4th of July. And with that, the pies that they preferred seemed to be fruit pies rather than cream pies. So we'll share some cream pie recipes with you later after the 4th, but for now I want to share a couple of those fruit pies. So today I'm going to make 2 of those. I'm going to make our fresh strawberry pie, and we have this off and on during the summer quite often because it's one of our family's favorites. My mother-in-law made it. She was a wonderful cook. So it's one of those things that we have quite often. And then I'm going to show you a triple berry pie. So if you're not a strawberry fan, or if you just like something different, this has a combination of berries in it. And so those are the 2 that we're going to make. We're going to be out of town for, I'm going to be out of town for the weekend. I'm going to my granddaughter's weekend ball tournament in Jefferson City. And so I will share some other fruit pie recipes when I come back. 2 varieties of cherry pie, I think, are what are on the agenda to do. I also, on Monday when I get back, I'm going to have a local lady that is going to come and share a family recipe with you. Her and my daughter-in-law are going to come in and make some different recipes. But anyway, so we're going to start this recipe and the other recipe with a basic flaky pie crust. And I am going to actually make 1.5 of these recipes. Now, the normal recipe that will be posted makes 1 double pie crust, but I'm going to want a little bit extra because I'm only making full bottom crust for both of the fruit pies I'm sharing today. But I also want some extra to make some cutouts for our 4th of July pie. And so I want to make sure I have plenty. And if you have extra, our kids, when they were growing up, loved it when I'd make extra dough, roll it out, put cinnamon sugar on it, and bake it. And that was kind of a treat for them. So anyway, I'm making 1.5 times the recipe that is posted. So in your bowl, you're going to put 2 cups of flour. And to that, you're going to add, if you're making a double crust, you're going to add a teaspoon of salt to that and mix it in. Okay. Once you get that mixed in, we're ready to cut in our shortening. And the recipe calls for 1 cup of Crisco. And again, I have extra because I'm making 1.5 times. Now, when you go to cut this in, you can use your pastry blender to cut it into small pieces. Now, when you cut it into these pea-sized pieces, that's what's going to give you the flakiness of your crust. So you want to make sure not to mix it in. You want to cut it in. If you don't have a pastry blender, though, you can easily do the same thing with a fork by just cutting it in that way. Okay? So that's possible to do if you don't have it. My cup's in the background. Tumblers with Friends made our giveaway cup, and Jody Kurtz won that and the mat, but she also was nice enough to make me one that's Cooking with Some Friends, and she made one for my daughter-in-law who sets up my videos. So anyway, I want to thank Sherry for that again. So I'm going to cut this shortening in until it's in, just like I said, pea-sized pieces to give us that flakiness. Now, old-time cooks used to use lard instead of shortening, which is a animal product, instead of a vegetable product, which it also gives it a very flaky crust, but oh, it gives it such a richness. It's wonderful. But it's also got saturated fat, so we try to stay away from that as a society more and more. So, okay, so I've cut in my shortening. Up my pastry blender a little bit. And you can see it just resembles kind of a crumbly mixture. Okay. Then I want to put in my water, and I'm going to add cold water to this, a half a cup. Now I'm going to put my 3/4 cup in because I'm increasing my recipe, but the recipe is for half a cup. Okay. To that water though, before I mix it in, and cold water does work better, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vinegar. Excuse me. I'm not going to add it all at once. Okay. When you roll your crust out, you don't want to overwork the dough because the more you work it, the harder it is to roll out. So if you can get it in your first roll out, that's actually better than to have to roll it out several different times to adjust it. Okay. Fast that flour out of the bottom of my pan or bowl. Okay. Now I do have some extra flour sitting over here in the bowl, and there's a reason for that as well. When I go to roll this out to put into my pie plate, I'm going to need to flour the surface so that it doesn't stick. So that's what that flour is for. And I always get more out usually than I need because I don't want to have to run out and go get more. Okay. Put that aside. Now, when you roll your dough out, you can do a couple of things when you roll this out, or do it in a couple of ways. If you have a silicone mat, you can roll it out on that. My silicone mat, that it says it doesn't need to be floured, but it does. Okay, so you can use your silicone mat if you have one. Lay that out on your counter, and so many of them, they have the measurements, so you don't have to guess what size you're making. If you don't have a silicone mat, if you have a pastry cloth, this is just like a sackcloth, you can lay it out, flour this surface as well, and then roll your dough out on that. If you don't have either one of those, you could actually take a damp towel, make sure it's a smooth, low pile towel, not something really thick, and put a piece of parchment over that and flour that just a little bit and roll out your crust that way. So, but I'm going to use my silicone mat, and I'm going to flour that. And I'm going to take the amount of dough that I'm going to need for just a bottom crust. So if you made the regular recipe, you're going to take half your dough. And I'm just going to knead that a couple of times on my mat before I roll it out, just to make sure it's all sticking together. Okay. And I'm ready to roll it out to the size that I want. And again, you need to apply some pressure, but you don't want to go too crazy. You don't want your dough to be tough. I like to turn it partway through to make sure there really is flour underneath there so it's not sticking. And you don't want it to stick to your rolling pin either. Okay, we're going to work it gently to a circle shape. And you want it just a little bit larger in your pie plate. And for the strawberry pie, I like to use a deep pie plate. And the same way for the other one we're going to be sharing, to get lots and lots of berries in there. Oops. That over. Okay. So once we get that rolled out, I'm trying to get my 4th of July decorations out and got them partially done. I'm going to take my pie plate. Make sure it's on there. And I'm going to take my dough, gently fold it in half. You don't want to crease it. You want your thumbs under. You want to lift it a little over halfway. And then you want to unfold it. Now don't overstretch your pie crust. If you do, it'll shrink up more. And then all I have to do is I have to finish the edges. I'm going to flute those or fold them under and flute the top a little bit. My oven is preheating for getting ready for this shell. It's at 400 because we're going to bake this before we put the filling in. Now, if you over rolled it to a larger size, you can always trim that back before you fold under the top and flute the edges. The crust sometimes for some people is one of their favorite parts of the pie. Okay. So we're fluted all the way around. Now this is going to be ready to go into the oven. But before you do, you don't want that pie to shrink. So there are a couple of things you can do. I have beads that I put in. These were designed specifically for this. I put them around in my shell. So when I bake this, it won't shrink up. Now, if you don't have beads, what you can use, if you use dry beans, you can put those in the bottom of it to bake. If you don't want to do those. And by the way, if you do use the beans, don't throw them away when you're done. Just let them cool, put them in a Ziploc bag and use them the next time you need them. If you don't have either one of those or don't want to use either one of those, you can take a small piece of foil and fit it just gently inside the pie crust, bake it part way, and then take that foil out, and that way it won't shrink up as much. So this one's ready to go in the oven to pre-bake, and I'll come back and show you the filling that's going to go in it. Okay, we're back. Our pie crust has baked to a golden brown, and you can see that in the background. And I went ahead and took my beads out so that as it cools, it doesn't leave that impression. But now we're ready to make the filling for our fresh strawberry pie. And in my pan, my saucepan, and you want a fairly good sized saucepan because as this cooks and when it boils, you don't want any of this hot sugar on to splash out and get on your skin. But to this, I've put in 1 cup of sugar, and I put my cornstarch in. You're gonna need about 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and then I added 1 cup of water. So that's what's in my pan. And I'm gonna heat this until it boils, and then once it starts boiling, I'm going to go ahead and let it keep boiling while I stir until it thickens up. And that'll take, after the boil, it'll take a couple of minutes. And it'll get thick and kind of clear. So I've had this on for just a few minutes so that it can start that process. Now I have my Jell-O ready. You're going to add a package, 3-ounce package of Jell-O, strawberry, and you want your fresh strawberries prepared. We have a strawberry patch, but this is my husband's first year with the new strawberry patch. Our old strawberry patch, he built a workshop on top of where the old strawberry patch was. So we're starting all over on our strawberries. And we got a few off the new patch this year, but next year will be better. So I've had to purchase strawberries for my pies this year, where I normally get to use the fresh ones out of our garden. But they had some nice looking strawberries at the store. I didn't prepare this one, I just kept it out. But I went ahead with the others, and if they were larger, I sliced them up, I stemmed them all. If the core in them is too much or too big or pithy at all, then you might want to remove those as well. But I done that, and it'll take about 1.5 pints or 4 cups of berries for this pie, strawberries. And the only other thing you're gonna need, and this is optional, but I like the color, it gives just a couple drops of red food coloring. Okay, so you wanna stir this, and it's really kind of handy to make this while your pie crust is cooling. You do want this to cool down as well after we get it all prepared. So I would let it cool a little bit on its own at room temperature, and then you can always pop it into the refrigerator for 15 minutes or so, so it starts to cool a little bit more before you add it to the berries in the crust. So bring it to a boil, let it boil a couple of minutes, and then we will go ahead and add the Jell-O, remove it from the heat, add the Jell-O and the food coloring. In the meantime, while after this cools, we're gonna arrange our strawberries in that pie crust and pour this filling over the top of it. So you can see I've got my other, I think it's in the shot, I've got my other pie crust waiting for my other berry pie. I've also cut out some star shapes, have a little extra dough left over. Okay, so we're starting to get to that boil, and you can see it's starting to thicken up. I'm gonna drop my heat down just a little bit. So you want this to boil about 2 minutes just to get super thick. See how thick it's getting, and it will get almost opaque. If you don't cook it quite long enough, it will stay runny when you put it over your berries. And you don't want that because then the crust gets soggy. And you want about a medium to medium low heat. And we're almost there. Nice and thick filling. Now there are some of these fresh strawberry pie recipes that don't call for the Jell-O, but we like the strawberry flavor that it gives it, and it helps keep it thick. Okay. There we go. Nice and thick. Turn the heat off. Take this off the heat just a little bit. Add that package of Jell-O. Stir that in. And then, see, it does have a red color, but again, I like just a little bit redder, so it doesn't take much, just a few drops of red food coloring. And that'll darken up that red. Okay, so we're ready to let this cool at room temperature for a little bit, then I'll pop it in the refrigerator, then I'll come back and show you what it looks like over the strawberries. I've gone ahead and my prepared strawberries are now in my pie shell, my baked pie shell. My filling has cooled in the refrigerator, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and place that filling over the top, and it'll run down into those berries. Make sure we get it all over. And there we have our fresh strawberry pie. Make sure that gets down in there. And you could mix the berries into the filling, but sometimes you get a little too rough and you end up mashing the berries and the juice coming out. So you don't want that to happen. So now when this is set up, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. When it's set up completely, we can go ahead and serve it with some whipped cream or on its own. Fresh strawberry pie. I'm back to show you the second pie that we're going to make that would be great for the 4th of July. So we always have several different celebrations to go to. We have one in a neighboring town. We go and watch the fireworks a lot of times. Our local Lions Club puts that on. We sometimes go out to my sons. We've gone away to another town to one of my other sons. And we always have something here where we and the neighbor, we have fireworks as well as our neighbors. And so we kind of have a neighborhood thing going on. But in almost all those situations, food is involved. And so hopefully you'll have a great 4th and be able to use some of these recipes we're sharing for the 4th. I don't know what your plans are. Be glad to hear what you're going to do over the 4th. If you want to share it in the comments. And I just hope you have a great but a safe 4th of July. Now, the recipe I'm going to share with you right now is triple or a medley of berry pie. And so we made the strawberry pie, and you can see the crust is still cooling. My strawberries are ready. My filling is in the refrigerator cooling down a little bit. My oven is preheating for this pie. I've already prepared the pie shell. It's over here to the side, and you don't bake it until after you put the filling in. So that's getting ready, or that's already prepared, and I increased my flaky pie crust recipe by half again so that I'd have enough for that. I've also I've used my star cookie cutters, and I've cut out some average size or medium size hearts, and then some small ones that I'm going to use as my top crust for this pie. And the extra dough, like I said in my other video, we like a lot of times to just don't waste it. Put some cinnamon sugar on it, throw it in the oven, and then you can piece on that. But the triple berry pie, what you're going to need. You need that pie shell that I explained, and you can either use a whole pie shell and vent it, seal it, vent it like you would a normal 2-shell pie or 2-crust pie, or you can do a lattice pie top for this one, or you can do like I did with the stars, just to make it a little more festive. But you're also going to need, besides that pie shell, you're going to need 7 cups of berries. Now, it's a combination of blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries, and it's a little over 2 cups of each, but so that you end up with 7 cups. And if you have black raspberries, that works. They didn't have any black raspberries in our local store, so I used the red ones, which I like those anyway, so that's fine. I also need a cup of sugar plus a little extra that we'll sprinkle over the top of those stars or the top of your shell if you're going to do that. And I need a tablespoon of lemon juice, so you can use fresh squeezed or bottled, and a 1/4 cup of cornstarch for your thickener, and then 2 tablespoons of butter. So I'm going to put the berries in my pan, all 7 cups of the mixture. If you want to or don't have fresh berries available, you can actually use the frozen medley berries, and they work as well. Just make sure you thaw them and that they're not too runny, too much water in them. Okay, so I've added my 7 cups of berries, and I'm going to also put in my sugar. And once we get to a certain point, if you want to taste your berry filling and it's not quite sweet enough, you could always add more sugar at that point. And then I'm going to put in my lemon juice. Okay, I'm going to put this on a medium to a medium-low heat, and I'm going to heat that up till it simmers, and stir it every so often, but be careful because you don't want to crush up your berries. So I'm going to heat that, and when it comes to a simmer, I'm going to let it simmer about 5 to 10 minutes, or until it's warm and the juices are flowing, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do after that. Okay, we're back to our triple berry pie, and this has been simmering for a little while, and I've gone ahead, I need to drop that heat so it doesn't boil. I need to go ahead, and I've removed, after it simmered and I got some juices, I removed about a 1/2 cup of the juice, and I'm gonna set that off the heat while I do this next. I can bring it back to a simmer in a second. So a 1/2 cup of juice, and to that I'm gonna add the cornstarch that I have measured out. And I'm just gonna whisk this in. This is our thickener for our filling. with the 4th of July coming up, like I said before, we have lots of family activities that are going on. But before the 4th gets here, my husband and I are going to get to go to I have a family reunion on my mother's side in northern Minnesota. So we're going to get to go do that. And what's fun is I'll have a bunch of my cousins and uncles and aunt and there, and we're all going to cook together. So be looking for those videos of my family cooking together. It ought to be a blast. They're quite the group, so it should be fun. Okay, so I've got that thickener made. Now I want to return my berries to that simmer, and it shouldn't take it long because it's still nice and warm. And then I'm going to gradually add the thickener to that. Just another second. So I want to stir this in, and it'll take it, just a couple of minutes, 2 to 5 minutes. I know that's quite a span, but it just depends on the juiciness of your berries to thicken up. So I want that to cook to thicken. Make sure I get all my thickener in there. And make sure you don't boil, just simmer. And when this thickens up, I'm going to remove it from the heat again, and I'm going to add my butter to it, and then I'm going to let that cool for 15 minutes or so, and then it'll be ready. It'll thicken up some more, and it'll be ready to pour my pie shell. And at that point, we'll put the top shell, or in this case, the stars on it. So we'll be back when this thickens up. It's starting to now. So my pie filling has been simmering for 2 or 3 minutes, and it might take a little longer than that, but mine didn't. And if you can see how thick that has gotten. So now I'm ready to take that 2 tablespoons of butter and stir it into my filling. And then this has to cool down just a little bit before I can put it in my pie shell. So I'm gonna leave it to cool here on my trivet for about 15 minutes. And then we'll put it in the pie shell and we'll put the top on it. Okay, our berry filling, I don't know why that was difficult for me, has been cooling for about 15 minutes. So we're ready to dump that into our prepared pie shell. Smells wonderful. And we've preheated our oven to 400 degrees for this pie to go into. Make sure you get all that filling. Don't waste anything. Okay, and then we're going to take the stars that we cut out earlier and we're going to arrange those onto the pie. And I'm going to just randomly put those out there. No rhyme or reason to it, just arranging them. Like I told you before, you could actually make a regular pie crust and vent it over the top of your pie, or you can make a lattice pie shell. Pretty much do whatever you want here on the top of this. Now, I want a few more stars, so I'm going to that dough that I left out to possibly use the cinnamon sugar. I'm going to use some of it here to actually add more stars to my pie. Won't be much waste to this at all by the time I get them all on the pie. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the oven that's preheated to 400, and it has to bake about 40 to 45 minutes until your top crust, or in this case the stars, are browning. It's stuck in the cookie cutter. You could even take your star cookie cutter that maybe you have them from Christmas, and you could make a pattern with stars in part of the pie and then just cut waves and make those the stripes of your flag. There's no rhyme or reason. It's whatever you want to create. So again, goes in the oven, and I'll show you the finished pie. Thanks for joining us for this session of Cooking with Some Friends. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And find us on Facebook at Cooking with Some Friends.